welcome to my little corner of the internet where I set, work towards, and document the progression of my goals. My name is Melanie, and I'm so happy to have you with me here today. So as I mentioned, this channel is a goal-setting channel, and with that said, one of my goals for 2024 was to read 24 books, and book number 13 was appropriately numbered Bunny by Mona Awad. And I have to say, this book is definitely one that really got me thinking, and I thought was worth a discussion. And also, I'd like to share my theory, because here's the thing about this book. It is open to interpretation. I have not seen anybody talk about this book who said that they had a definitive idea of what happened, that it was very obvious to understand what happened. They had to really sit and think about it and contemplate it and probably make their own theories, because the book doesn't tell you what it is. It makes you do the work. Before I get into anything specific about the book, I'm just going to give you a spoiler alert right now. I do not know how to talk about books without spoiling them, especially a book where I'm going to try to talk about what I think happened and like what my theories on it. It's impossible. So if you want my recommendation, look, Bunny is an interesting, unique, exciting story that's fairly easy to read. Like, it's hard to grasp, but it's easy to read, if that makes sense. So anyway, there's my recommendation. Go read it, come back after you've read it, and we can talk about our theories and other thoughts concerning it. So this book, Bunny, it's pretty much like a Mean Girls, if Mean Girls was a novel written by H.P. Lovecraft and Stephen King, but as a woman, and also with the protagonist being someone who is more than likely schizophrenic and also an unreliable narrator, meaning that we're not sure what happened, what was her perception of what happened, or if she was just telling a story from the beginning, because as she admits, her character throughout the book loves a good story. So it's very hard for us to tell what she's saying because she means it, and what she's simply saying to take us on a ride. With that said, we pretty much have this character, Samantha. She's a tall goth girl, an outsider. Some other people talking about this book have described her as pretentious, but I understand where she's coming from, because the people she's surrounded by aren't exactly understanding or creating a real connection with her. So she does feel very much alone and isolated until she at least meets somebody who is very special to her, her best friend, Ava. And we'll get more into Ava in a little bit. But pretty much she's all alone other than her friend. And the other girls in her program all seem to have formed a clique with each other, excluding her. So she's the odd one out, and everybody else within her group in the program, they are this one clique of girls who call themselves Bunny, and they just act very bizarre, very childlike. And Samantha kind of finds herself judging them, but also fascinated by them in a way. However, one day the bunnies do take notice of her and invite her into their group, and you can only imagine that, this being the story that it is, that things get a little bit crazy. It turns out to be some sort of girlish cult where they are conjuring men out of animals, and Samantha ends up kind of losing herself, losing her sense of identity, her sense of desire, and knowing who she is as a person and what she wants in life, in order to become somebody who belongs to this group and is accepted into this group. Even though as time goes on, she realizes that they're not actually good people, but for whatever reason, she still finds herself being sucked in and losing herself further and further. The girls ask her to lead a conjuring session herself, and when things don't go according to plan, she finds herself dejected from the bunnies. However, all of the things that she has stirred up herself within this time come back to haunt her. I definitely thought that this book was very well put together, very well thought out. And the one thing I will say is that I certainly did not fully understand it after my first read. So even though I could just pick it up and read the whole thing in a very short amount of time, it was like I didn't have all the information I needed or the context I needed to really put together what was going on. It was almost just like a fever dream where I was living in the dark. And then once you have some context after the first read, you can go back in, which is what I ended up doing, and read this book twice in a row, even though I didn't necessarily want to, because I knew that I needed to have a better understanding of it than I did after that first read. And in the second read, you can see so much that I saw so much that I was completely oblivious to in the first read. Now, a lot of people have all sorts of theories about what's going on in this book. I definitely understand, like, some people said they think she's really in a mental institution the whole time. And all these things are possible. I'm not denying any of these theories. Like, I don't claim to actually know what really happened in this book. But I don't think it's like a mental hospital, or that she just made the whole thing up. Like, even within the book that is fictional, like, her character made it all up, and the reality of her character is different from what she tells in the story. It's possible that because she was given drugs when she was at these ceremonies, and a lot of things seem to go back to normal very quickly, where like the house that was covered in blood all of a sudden isn't covered in blood anymore, or the room where Max was staying doesn't look like anybody's been living in it. You can tell through these things that maybe her perception is a little bit off, and that she's hallucinating things that aren't really happening while she's on drugs. But what doesn't make sense to me about that is, if that is the case, then why does everybody else seem to be in on the things that are happening? The conjured partners that they're trying to create for themselves, they all seem to acknowledge their existence and to be aware of what's happening.
Also, I feel I need to mention the whole bunnies following her around campus thing, because that very much seems like it would have been a hallucination. However, we know that Jonah also had perceived them, as he acknowledges them to her and they talk about it. Now, with that said, we're still not entirely sure that Jonah's not a hallucination within himself, but I personally tend to think that he's real.
So what do I think actually happened? Because those are all just like possible theories, right? What I think really happened is, I'm going to take this book at face value, except for some moments where she seems to be hallucinating. Like, there are some moments where I will say, like, okay, maybe she hallucinated a detail here or there, a few things that don't make sense. I will rest them on her not being a reliable narrator. But what I think actually happened is that the conjuring was real. She did conjure Ava. She did conjure Max. They did conjure all of the darlings that she runs into in society and sees and perceives in the book. I think that as far as this book is concerned, that those things happened within the actual story, and that she just wasn't really aware that she already harnessed this sort of creative energy and power. So with that said, I know that's not much of a theory in itself, but this is what I noticed on the second read around. So there are the 4 bunnies, and all 4 of them have a nickname which kind of gives them their role within the group. So we have Eleanor the Duchess, Vignette, Victoria, Creepy Doll, Kira, and we have Caroline, known as Cupcake. What I noticed on the second read is that Eleanor is the one who is pretty much in charge of everything within the group, and that the other girls are very passive. But not only that, okay, so in the beginning of the book, when Samantha is talking about the girls, she has memories of both Kira, Creepy Doll, and Victoria, Vignette. She remembers both of them before they were in the group. So we have memories of them being their own people before they became bunnies. Cupcake, however, does not have any of these memories, and in addition to that, there were actually 3 instances where she was acting like she was a draft herself. So part of me thinks that she was actually conjured from a cupcake by Eleanor herself, because she really doesn't seem very real, especially because she compliments Samantha's earrings when she's not wearing earrings, she compliments Samantha's dress when she's not wearing a dress, and she offers to take her coat off when she's not wearing a coat. She did these things not once, not twice, but 3 times, and the only other beings in this entire book who act like this aren't the other bunnies, but the darlings that they've conjured. Nobody who's actually really alive and full of substance acts like that. With that said, I definitely think that Eleanor is some sort of witch. I put a bunch of notes here, so I'm just gonna like read them. It's just easier for me to like read this to you. I wrote, the truth about the Duchess. She controls everything. She's the one who notices Ava at the party in the beginning. she's the one who guides the girls in everything that they do.
She's also the only one that doesn't have to open her box during the group critique towards the end of the book.
She's the one with the original thoughts and judgments towards Samantha. So on page 91, she starts to, one of the hybrids goes off on her, and you can sense, especially in the second read, that what he is saying to her is really like the voice of the bunnies. But which of the bunnies? It's Eleanor. And she says through the hybrid, she's really just giving like observations and critiques of Eleanor as she would in their writing workshop.
Says abrasive, angry, invested in her own outsiderness, gritty, oh so gritty. You think you're better than us, Samantha? Well, you're effing not. We tried to braid your hair, you didn't let us braid it. We invited you to things, you wouldn't come. We asked you to come out for bento boxes, and you said, no, I'm too busy and important, and better than you are for bento boxes. But you don't remember. All you remember is Samantha Heather Mackey is the victim. Samantha Heather Mackey is in pain. Samantha Heather Mackey's heart is on fire with all the feelings she thinks only she can feel. Samantha Heather Mackey thinks her stories are so effing great. Samantha Heather Mackey doesn't say it, but she thinks she's too good for the whole effing world.
And it goes on. I'm not going to read all of this.
But I definitely find it interesting that on the first read, I thought that maybe these were Samantha's paranoid thoughts, when on the second read, it became more than apparent that the darling was being used as a puppet to transmit Eleanor's actual voice.
There was a scene where Victoria didn't want to involve Samantha, and Eleanor had to like whisper to her and remind her of why they were including her. So it makes it very clear that they are using Samantha, that she was brought in and invited into the group because there was something that Eleanor wanted from her. And it's interesting because the narrator doesn't spell this out to us, because in the beginning of the book, the narrator is unaware that she's being used. And I think that's one really important thing about this book, is that Samantha doesn't realize during the book that she's being used. She gives us an account, maybe a realistic one, maybe, probably not, of all the things that she's experiencing, or at least says she's experiencing, but she never expresses that she's being used by these girls, or at least the head of these girls, which is Eleanor. We really only see what she experienced while she was being used. Okay, here's what I'm trying to get at though with it, is that at the end of the day, Eleanor was the one who noticed Ava, and I think that in that moment, the reason that she invited her into the group was because she ultimately wanted to use Samantha's conjuring. She wanted to get to the point where everything led up to, or Samantha would lead one of these initiation rituals, because she wanted to use Samantha's magic and have Samantha and all of Samantha's power become a part of the collective rather than standing in its own individual right, and perhaps even outshining and outperforming the rest of the girls.
We can't ignore that the hybrids that the bunnies made were seriously flawed, where they had imperfections that led to them having to cover parts of their faces or wearing gloves to cover their hands, and even had non-functional genitals. It's very clear that because Samantha's conjured darlings don't have these issues, that perhaps her magic is just a little bit stronger than Eleanor's.
I guess I have to say that's pretty much my way of seeing it, is that I see it as this girl was used for the power that she had inherently because she didn't value it within herself, and she almost lost her way in order to become a part of this group. And the group just wanted to use her.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, I felt like this book was really more of a battle between Eleanor and Samantha over anything else.
I mean, the book has plenty of other themes as well. Killing your darlings, or performing the body, all these things. I mean, I could get into them. I don't really want to. I just wanted to express like how I interpreted this book and what I thought of it. And I will say, like, I didn't love everything about this book. It probably took a little more effort than I would have liked, although I do appreciate it for that as well. I did feel like some moments were just kind of weird or awkward or out of place. Even on the second read, it just felt a little confusing at times, but maybe on the third read, which I'm not giving it, I would understand it even better, because there was really no theory that I could come up with that made everything make sense. So I think that what I have to do as the reader in this book is to just take my interpretation and understand that the parts that don't make sense are probably due to her being an unreliable narrator, which is honestly a realistic thing in life. I mean, who's a truly 100% reliable narrator? We're all biased. We all have our own way of seeing things. It's probably a little bit skewed. But with that said, I thought that this book was a solid work of literature, and I think I'm going to give it a 4.2 out of 5 stars. which is honestly pretty high for me. A book has to be really stunning to get over a 4.2 for me, and it's definitely one of the better books that I read this year for sure. It made me think, it was fun, it was original, and I mean, honestly, like, one thing that I just love about a book is if I'm thinking about it for hours after I read it, or days after I read it, or I'm so intrigued that I have to go back and read it, even though I don't want to read it again. Like, that's a good sign. I would not do that if a book wasn't worth it. I thought it was a very funny book. And also, like, watching her narration change as her state of mind changes throughout the book, I also thought that that was executed very masterfully. Like, it's a masterfully written book. It stands on its own. Like, yeah, this book did something. This book stood out, and I'm happy I read it, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody else, especially if you are interested in like dark academia, cult, or even just like Mean Girls type of books. And honestly, there's probably so many other things in this book that I could have covered, but I've been filming this for almost 30 minutes now, and I think I got the main points that I wanted to express across. Oh, and as far as Ava goes, I think she was as far as real enough to be perceived by Samantha and the bunnies, although of course she was just conjured, so she was not a true person. Personally, I do believe that Eleanor and the other bunnies murdered her. However, that is definitely open to debate. So I'm gonna call it here. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have you read Bunny? What are your theories on it? Are we on the same page about this? Am I totally missing something very important about the book? Because I wouldn't put it past myself. And also, if you enjoyed this video, you found value in it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have not subbed to the channel and you're interested in literature or goal setting, then I would love it if you hit subscribe. And yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.